Today isn't the last day. We just loaded up our cars with all our stuff, so not sure what to expect for today. It's probably going to be an early bailout, but overall I had a good time. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of hours.
Some of the cartoons in the 90s would get for various perspectives of how the landscape has changed there. We're all very professional here. I'm very pleased to have Flint and Jeff here to speak on the subject, as you both have been very, very prolific in the industry, no question about that. So, I guess you guys sell yourself short, come on. But the 90s, in terms of the mentality that went into animation, changed in a lot of ways. And one of the big ways, right, was in things like the 70s and 80s. We saw cartoons that were made specifically just to shill toys out to children, and more importantly, parents with the children that come to buy them. But the 90s, we saw kind of an detachment from that in a lot of ways. We didn't have things like the Transformers and My Little Pony that were like, oh, here's a 30 or like 22-minute commercial for this on top of the commercial I'm going to show you during. And for both of you, I was curious as to what your thoughts were on the industry that you were just getting into in terms of a very wildly changing landscape.
Yeah, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, good, all right, that's, sorry, hold on. Microphone, can you hear me? Yeah, I mean, because like my TV animation heyday was, yeah, I started in like 83, and then, for me, the writing in animated TV shows for toy shows, certainly, ended in like 87. And then I got kind of lucky. The first thing that happened is I was coming out and I went to work on the show we showed a little bit of that I'd never seen last night, Garbage Pail Kids for CBS. And that was not a toy, it was a licensed property. And remember, there's a very thin line of difference here. One is, that's a pre-sold licensed property, which known in the industry as a golden ashtray. And that was, everybody wanted the golden ashtray, and that was the hot property that year. So that would be the network would license it from, in that case, Topps Chewing Gum, but think of the trading cards. Sure. Okay. Now whereas with Hasbro, they were taking the toy and making a 22-minute show of their toy, as a kind of 22-minute commercial. And now, bear in mind, it's not like there was some brand new Ultraman from CBS that they were making the show, so they were trying to make money too. Everybody in the whole equation was trying to make money, except for PBS, and that's its own animal. But even they're trying to make money.
I would say I can't show what they're trying to make money.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying. I totally, I mean, so somehow acting like the Jack Hood octopus of capitalism was making these shows in the 80s, and these altruistic, nice people were doing it in the 90s, but it's not a totally accurate picture of what was actually happening. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, for me, that stuff just ended when a lot of things happened. There was new legislation that prevented the toy shows. In the particular case of Hasbro, Stephen Hasselfeld had gotten sick and was dying, and kind of restructured his whole company with an idea of survival of the company, right? And it worked, they're still there. In fact, a lot of those companies aren't, that they bought up most of the competition.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I went to CBS and was doing Garbage Pail Kids, which was an in-house network production that they were unable to air because at that point, I mean, these are the people who were always giving us notes and controlling what we did, and we did a show that was so controversial that they just couldn't even put it on the air themselves. And it was released on DVD, I think 2012, and I had never actually seen an episode until last night. And sure enough, I was out there with the story editor and all that, it's kind of like, nah. But I told them I did and the exact same, back in the 90s, you had phone machines. I'm only going into this detail because it was just an interesting moment that summed up the changing era for me. The phone machine is, the first message was from Judy Price, who'd like to get a lunch, and she had 3 glasses of wine. And
Judy was the, Judy was.
Judy Price was you could argue the queen of Saturday morning TV. She ran Saturday morning for CBS for a very long time, and had a, that's a good point. Yeah, am I describing her well?
Yeah, the other one's Fred Silverman.
Fred Silverman was the other one.
Earlier.
When I met him, yes, because Fred Silverman defined an entire era of TV. He started out at WGN in Chicago. But there's another really fascinating example of what happened with media. He took these old jungle movies called Zimbabwe movies, and they're actually in the Indian jungle or something, and gave a flashy soundtrack to them with great bumpers and teasers, and made a hit out of it for WGN. And so then he finally ended up running ABC. And then NBC. And when I met him, he was consulting at Ruby Spears, helping us get animated shows done. But anyway, so that was the era that immediately preceded the toy era. The toy era was all syndication, it was a product on cable. And so it started with Masters of the Universe, but it was really, really a business model in the sense that, people that employed me, sorry, I'm backtracking a little bit, but employed me were in fact ad agents. And so they made the commercials, and somebody got the brilliant idea of, hey, so if we make a half-hour show about Transformers, that means that our competitors have to advertise inside our advertising. It was pretty much how they thought. Now, there's a very important distinction to make, and that is from a creative point of view. Remember, I'm a producer, a writer, and a story editor of this. And now, when I go back to New York, I function dangerously like an advertising executive. I just go back. I went back there to write the Transformer movie. But like in the afternoon, I was kind of written out or bored, they say, hey, come on up here. I'd be picking at me. I had no idea what I was doing, but they were really nice about it. Anyway, that for the reasons listed before, legislation, and Stephen Hassenfeld, and the Transformers, the movie, which by the way is currently in theaters and has been re-released for its 35th anniversary, was considered a bomb at the time. And so they stopped ordering shows. I could see the stuff on the horizon. A friend of mine was at CBS, offered me the garbage job to do it. Right now, I'm proud of where I almost was. Sorry about the Steve Silver. And then it's the garbage pail kid that's going horribly bad. I get home and you asked me to describe Judy Price. So Judy's on my answering machine. She's like, once she's on the news for a few hours. It's a restaurant. And it's not working out. I knew I was fired. Okay, all right, I just got fired. And I do, next message. Hey, this is Steve Spielberg. I love the pitch you gave Kathy and Deborah today. I want you to come write Looney Tunes, which ended up being a TV show called The Tiny Toons. So in one beep of my answering machine, I'd gone from being fired by Judy Price to hired by Steven Spielberg, and that was the trajectory of my career at that moment. I mean, literally just took that sharp a turn, and
It's like career
the
whiplash.
90s began for me in some late 87. What?
Just like career whiplash.
Yeah, it was a super whiplash. And the other person who was more or less fired, that she wasn't fired, but just the entire team changed, was my then girlfriend, Lou Overton, who at that exact moment was being hired to write, well, she was hired to write Disney babies. I was doing the Warner Kids, and she was doing Disney Kids. She later ended up writing Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, and Maleficent, Alice, and she went on to have quite a career, still hasn't. But anyway, we were like fired open, but it was like literally that day, the 80s ended for us. It was a couple years early, and the 90s began. And what I knew at that point, and I figured it out more or less when I was in film school, I was at SC, I don't know, 3 years earlier, or 6 years earlier, is all the jobs in films were kind of clogged up by the older baby boomers. And I was that middle group, like the 1946 people, owned the entire film industry and everything ahead of us. And I was a 1955 person. And that meant I had to go into tech. I mean, instead of, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs were that middle baby boomer. They were born the same year I was. And we all sort of knew that the only place to go is tech. So I wrote movies for studios for a long time, but that's when I started doing, at first, really highly experimental game projects and all that, but I knew that for survival, you had to migrate. Is that a really long-winded answer to your question?
I mean, it's a very detailed answer.
Sorry.
Let's look at it that way.
I'll be more terse later. Yeah, he promises to be coherent.
But Jeff, I mean, same question to you. I mean, you know, compared to like Flynn was saying, he was getting out of a lot of that stuff. You were, for lack of a better term, like a fresh blood coming into the '90s. Like, what was that like for you in that era?
So, can everybody hear me, by the way? Just in case this thing is like a voice. Okay. I can't not. So, just to give a little more detail on what Flynn was talking about, think of the 70s, children's television in the 70s was all about the four networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, and PBS, right? That's where and there was a time, for those of you who weren't alive then, where literally like the new shows that were going to premiere that year on a Saturday morning was a big deal.
Yep.
And you committed to like one network, and each network did a special on Friday night, the night before the Saturday morning premieres, and they were all at the same time, and they're all competing with each other. They usually starred some of their new primetime star from some series they were going to launch. And it was literally like a special variety show to prep you for all the new Saturday morning shows, so you could make your plans, because you had to be in front of your television. This is all through VCR. We're talking about the 70s. So, the end of the 80s, you still got those dominant four networks, but then you see the influx of what Phil was discussing, which is the syndication model. So in networks, the way a network works in television, they own or license kind of their shows to a whole bunch of stations around the country, right? Your local affiliates. So ABC has a number of stations they own, and then they got a whole bunch of other stations that they pay to run their program. And so that's the network model. What happened in the 80s was you started to get this syndication model, where shows were produced specifically to be sold to those individual stations and skip the whole network part of it. And that ended up in the kids space being controlled by ad agencies, that's what we're saying, because basically they were the ones who were in charge of selling the ad time anyway, and so they'd sell it to a toy company. And then they'd program with that toy company, or they already represented the toy company in most cases, and they'd put a show through that was owned by the toy company. The 90s come around, and you start to have the rise of the next wave of networks. So the first time you've got the beginnings of a Fox network, and a UPN, and a WB. And you also have the rise of more cable, the Cartoon Networks and the Nickelodeons of the world. And so you get all these new places you can go, and how does a new network, if you remember when Fox started as a primetime network, it was only on till like 10, and it wasn't every night of the week. But the way that they tried to break through was to be edgier, younger, more urban, different than the other three networks. And in my mind, at least, it's kind of what happened to cartoons in the 90s, is you've got these new outlets, you get this new model, you've got, how does UPN try to make itself different? How does Fox Kids make itself different? Kids WB. You do stuff that maybe the networks wouldn't have done. You get a little edgier, you even skew a little open. Like a lot of the stuff that was on Saturday morning was really meant for young kids. The idea to do Spielberg and then beyond was, great, we'll get those kids, let's see if we can get their parents too. Let's see if we can get everybody in between. And that was a change. So I think the biggest change in the 90s was almost driven by the change in the network business, driven by the change in the syndication business. And then you had, as you said, a lot of fresh blood coming in, because suddenly there was a lot more shows, right? And if Judy Price used to hire the same 5 people to do all her shows at CBS, well, here's UPN, here's Kids WB, they've never done this before. So I was exclusively a primetime writer and producer. My deal was at Sony at the time. They started a kids division. The guy who ran the kids division was someone I knew from when I was doing primetime with them. He called me and asked me how I would do Jumanji as a TV series for a new network that was coming up called UPN. They were just going to start their kids division 8 months from now or whatever. I watched the movie again. I wrote up about 20 pages. I put his name on them, because as far as I was concerned, it was a favorite. And I flew to Atlanta to produce a live action pilot for Fox. And by the time I got back, Jumanji had been ordered and I was producing. So that was my entree into the animation business. And in a weird way, I didn't know any better, so I thought it ran the same way as primetime. So I started hiring writing staffs, and maybe the scripts became everything for me. Whereas in the history of animation television, sometimes the writers were important, sometimes it was the directors and the artists, but usually it was really the product. The other thing I just want to make really clear, based on what you were saying before, was the idea that, like, yes, they weren't toy commercials anymore, but and maybe they weren't even based on pre-existing brands,
Right.
but they were absolutely the only way you made money in the animation business as the owner of the show is if you sold toys and licensing. So while they may not have been based on toys, it was all about will this idea sell toys?
Merchandise.
Merchandising. That's the shows ran at a deficit, at least in my experience. The shows ran, they lost money because it cost more to produce than it was more to pay for them. You made your money in merchandising. So you had to have a toy line to work. So shows didn't get canceled because they didn't get viewers. They got canceled because they didn't sell toys.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I mean, so I mean, this kind of weird. I mean, you're basically taking the same deck and shuffling it around. You know, I mean, the same deck of cards, different games. But I mean, there's it's like the difference between gin and gin rummy or something. I mean, I've never figured out. But yeah, I kind of work with that. That's a really good way of putting it. And also too, there's one other important thing is we're doing the animated shows. We were not competing, you know, with the toy shows. We were not competing with Saturday morning. We couldn't win that fight. Okay, we were in the afternoon. And you know, as I was saying before, what we figured out, you know, at Sunbow, it was just a chance conversation. I was getting Tom Griffin, who was an African panel, which was at agency. As he was talking about the recession, I realized, oh, we got to do a show that's not only for the kids, but dad's night. And so it's something he can watch with the kids, and that by its very nature made it more adult. And also, we didn't have the broadcast standards, because the other thing that happened, that I think really ossified Saturday morning, ultimately was why Garbage Pail couldn't be put on the air, was that you know, these action for, you know, children's television groups and these anti-violence groups and all that, and certain legislators, you know, had made writing TV, or that was all the jokes that Buzz was making last night about, okay, you can throw the pie in front of the person, if they fall over the pie. Well, I think Pink Floyd showed up. But you know, if they, you know, I can't remember what I said. It's just a race on the way from memory.
Yeah.
What? Oh yeah, but, you know, so there are all these weird rules about violence and social engineering and all that, and Saturday morning TV became really degrading, because I mean, I started out with writing things like Mr. T and you know, that stuff, but I mean, the rules were so elaborate that it was really, I mean, I functioned more like a game designer than a writer trying to figure out how to game the rules. I mean, that's really what it was. And that's what made, you know, the syndicated shows didn't care. They were a different time slot, they weren't regulated. And we had basic, you know, we didn't have disembowelings or, you know, sex or that in it, but the point is, you actually write stuff. It was great having the training, working around all the rules, but it was incredibly liberating. That's kind of what it goes. You know, in that period. And then the other thing is too, I think your budgets became really miniature when you guys were doing, you know, the Nickelodeon shows and stuff.
I was actually going to go the other way. I feel like during the 80s, the budgets were really minuscule, and then in the 90s, because there was more competition, you actually ended up, and because Spielberg's got involved and other people had certain expectations of technical quality, if not anything else.
So by the time we get to Disney and DuckTales and stuff,
you got more money.
We never had a money shortage doing Joe and Transform. I mean, I never once heard I could do something that I didn't know I had money. Yeah, none of that.
One of the changes, obviously, is technology gets better and better as time goes on. I mean, so you know, it's easy to look back at the 80s shows and, oh, look how quaint and cute they are based on against today's. But the technology is so different, it changes every year now. You know, I've done a number of CG shows over the years. I did a very early one years ago called Starship Troopers. And when I look back at that, I want to cry. It's awful looking compared to Transformers Prime, which I did, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. It's crazy.
Have you ever heard of Transformers CG movie in 2011? Just totally by chance, and yeah, it was amazing what they could do. But they were still, you could only have so many vibes and so
Right. So it's gotten, I'm now doing a CG show called Magic the Gathering, and the technology has jumped to a place where stuff I couldn't even imagine doing in Prime is now possible.
Some of the point brought up that I kind of want to like latch on to and see where that takes us, because one of the users, if we mentioned like a rise, like a lot of these groups, like, oh, we don't want like this excessive violence, we don't want this, that, the other thing, and our cartoons for the sake of some children. during the 90s we saw a lot of cartoons rise without that particular mindset. We saw, oh, we're gonna write things like specifically for adults. I mean, I think one example that comes like immediately to mind, like would be like Ren and Stimpy, right? Where it was just like, this cartoon is not for children. We're gonna put it on a children's network for whatever reason, but like we saw a lot of these cartoons come up with a very, very different mindset in the sense of like animation made specifically for adults. And I'm kind of curious as to what kind of impact that had on you guys in the sense, or what your opinions are on the subject of animation made specifically for adults rather than geared for children.
So when animation started, it wasn't for kids, right? It was feature animation. You went to the movie theater to see it. It was Warner Brothers adult cartoons, and over the years, those ended up getting played in syndication for kids. In later years, they got edited down, they got taken out. But animation isn't necessarily kids thing. It didn't start that way. It became it because it was really cheap to produce, much cheaper to produce an animated series than a live action one. So when you're dealing with a kids audience as your goal, you want to spend as little money as possible. But when we're talking about that, I think the biggest change in the 90s was, again, that rise of the cable networks. We had none of these requirements that we thought. By the way, Peggy Sharon, Action Children's Television, she's here, she's based out of Boston. So
was Marquee.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing was you had these cable networks that didn't have to follow those rules. Eventually those rules got relaxed in different ways anyway. But that, I think, was the biggest change. Again, when competition comes in, it tends to, how do you break through to do something different? The Saturday morning stuff is really targeting kids, and they're being very careful because they have to be legally. We don't have to be. We're going to do something different.
By the way, just a footnote, last night we showed a show called Little Clowns from Happy Town. Okay.
Based on the movie, was it?
No, there was a show called a company called Q5.
Right.
And they were a bunch of psychologists who were trying to make healthy, nutritious stuff for children. And so finally at some point, I think it was NBC, but I might be wrong about that, or some network, said, we'll let you do a show, and you do the perfect show. And we were screening it in our night screenings last night as all of us put on like the lowest link of the thing we were most embarrassed about we'd ever worked on. And two of the people last night, it was Little Clowns for Happy Town. It basically, there aren't really such things as better science cartoons for science. And that was living proof. But that was kind of the end of a certain kind of, academic interference in cartoons.
There was for years, and maybe there still isn't, there was a requirement that stations had to air 2 hours of educational programming. This is a local station issue. So that's why you still had some network Saturday morning until pretty recently. It was because it would fulfill those hours for those local stations. But you got, as a result, very scientifically designed.
Yeah, I don't know who watched this. Nobody watched this. It's like, I have no idea. I watch the other listen to it.
So what are your guys' takes on a lot of the cartoons in the 90s that were made? I guess the best way to phrase it is like with a celebrity mindset. And when I say that, I mean like things like the movie that was like, oh, this is Louis Anderson, the show, more or less. Like, I don't know. For me, as somebody who's never been in the industry, somebody who's ultimately fairly uneducated on the subject, it just seems like that would be, I don't know, creatively stifling, or potentially this unwanted hand in the process. Am I in the ballpark, or have you guys had completely different experiences with that?
Sometimes it'd be written by fans lists. I mean, the thing to bear in mind too is things tend to naturally evolve because all these kids were growing up, and so that was a lot of the market for what was adult. You have to follow your market, and they really enjoyed watching the cartoons when they were young, but now they're teenagers and they're older, and so you're making more sarcastic and more edgy and all that. I don't know. I mean, it's a good thing. I don't know that necessarily having a celebrity, hurt the process. It depended on the celebrity was. You know what I mean? And I mean, sometimes they were just legitimate funny people, they something wrong with them. but I don't think that hurt it.
You know, I agree with Clint. I think that there was a time where, you know, making a Rambo cartoon, which was prior to what you're really talking about, was probably a little bit tough. How do you balance that idea that you're going to take Sylvester Stallone killing a whole bunch of people and make it a kid show?
Yeah.
But by the time you get to the 90s, you're looking at like the life of Louis. So Louis Henderson's a really talented guy, right? He's got a very strong point of view. If you were writing a primetime show for Louis Henderson, you'd be thrilled. You'd be like, wow. So I think, no, that was actually probably really exciting to the people. And it was obviously that attempt to appeal to both kids and adults simultaneously in some way. I did a show for 5 years with Jackie Chan. So, you know, I don't know what I expected going in, but he was fantastic. You know, he actually really cared, wanted to do it, made himself available at least once or twice a year for us to shoot some live action wraparounds, he did do voiceover stuff. But his point of view, his history of movies, the way he looked at storytelling, impacted that show and was written by fans of his, so had a very strong point of view. And I actually feel like that was a huge advantage.
I mean, those were like the big points. Thank you for indulging me in that, anyways, because that was extremely enlightening and that kind of definitely shifted my thought about a lot of cartoons in the 90s. I guess I will open it up to the audience if there's anything specifically you guys wanted to ask about this, in a lot of ways, very like revolutionary era for cartoons.
It can be about anything. We both get pretty old, been around for a while. We'll talk about pretty much anything.
He's like slightly less old.
I'm inside. It's not the years, it's the mileage.
Well, one of the questions I have is, considering we have the advantage of having one of the original writers of Transformers, and you were writers of Transformers, what do you think is the difference between the two?
Prime, Robots and Skies.
Oh, wow.
So, how would you describe the difference between the two eras and writing?
So again, as far as I'm concerned, it has to do with the fact that in those 30 ensuing years or so, the goal changed to some degree. Like the 80s Transformers show did exactly what it was supposed to do and was incredibly successful at it. And the thing that impressed me most, I'm sure you've had this experience, I've gone to various Hasbro conventions when we were starting up Prime, and like people's memories, the ones who grew up on those shows, or even more so, like, I can't tell you how many moms wanted to say to Peter Cullen, thank you for raising my child. Peter Cullen's the voice of Optimus. And I mean, moms are crying at these conventions because they were working and the kids were a bit latchkey or whatever it was, and that voice and the extended family of Transformers meant something to those people watching, right? So that was the agenda at that point, was to sell toys, and it was insanely successful. It did that really, really well. Cut to 30 years later, our agenda with Transformers Prime was help launch a new network, get an older audience that can still, you know, we didn't want to be too dark for young, but we weren't a 6 to 11 show. We were really 11 plus. We later did younger, you know, Rescue Bots was the really young version. Robots and Skies was kind of in between. We started with Prime. And just the whole idea of you know, the expectations for animated television had changed by then. The expectation of quality, of complication of storytelling. You know, Transformers, the original, was very much one episode at a time. The stories didn't arc particularly. Maybe there was one macro story that would arc, but in general, you solved each of your stories. In Prime, we had things go on across not just one season, but 3 seasons. You know, we still try to solve a problem every episode, whatever that might be. Some of them went across a couple, but just the change in television in general. This is primetime, kids, animation, life, it doesn't matter. Storytelling got much more complex in television over the last 30 years. We're considered right now to be in a G3 time for primetime television, like the 3rd golden age. The first, you know, the 70s was the golden age. Then you had the time of Hill Street Blues and beyond. That was the 2nd golden. Now you're in this 3rd golden age. The question is, are streamers going to eventually kill it? Because it's become this kind of one-way ecosystem, and there's fewer new voices coming in or whatever. I'm not sure. There's more programming now than there's ever been, so I'm not sure I agree with that idea that G3 is over. But animation in the last 10 years has reflected the change in TV overall. So the big change is just the rules change.
You triggered like 15 different thoughts. No, because I mean, everything you say is absolutely true. And there, I had two things that instructed, just changed my mind about Transformers, okay? Cut to, I work on Transformers and, you know, get done at like 87, right? Probably early 87. And don't even think about Transformers until I got called to do the first Michael Bay game, okay, for the game first Michael Bay game. And so did that, and of course, I'm like utterly unaware of everything that happened to Transformers after I was done. It's like, I didn't follow it, it's not like I was a fan of it, it's not like I paid attention, I didn't know about the comics, I didn't know, because I was busy having my own career, you know, and so I read the Michael Bay script, and I didn't understand what the All-Spark was, and then, okay, that's kind of like the Matrix, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I figured it out. Okay, then I don't think about Transformers again, you got to another, actually I did one game that didn't happen for Treyarch, we sent out the junk. Then don't think about it again until it's 2011. And this is what taught me, there's a point to it. This is what taught me everything I needed to know about what happens to a franchise. So I'm sitting there working on a game called Diablo 3 at a company called Blizzard, which is now notorious, but nothing notorious was happening then. And I'm with a guy named Chris Menson. Okay, Chris Menson was a creative lead at Blizzard, and it created World of Warcraft, StarCraft, Diablo, and with a year later, 2 years later, to Overwatch. You could argue World of Warcraft is the most successful entertainment product in history. I can make an excellent argument.
That is a very real argument.
Certainly, you know, gross revenue and hours spent in it, you know, so on. Anyway. So anyway, Metz and I are sitting and working on Diablo 3. He leans over, he turns around one day and says, hey, we do a Transformer graphic novel with me. It's like, sure. I mean, I'm still with you guys. It's great. But I included this guy. Nobody knows who he is because it's a game company, but I mean, this guy wants to do a Transformers graphic novel. And I should have known him. His office looked like a shrine in my career in the 80s, right? You know, he had all the, still the bubble wrap, and, you know, he had the Joes and the Transformers and all that. Anyway, he's no small part of the reason I wrote the book, but he wrote a book for the back. But anyway, so Metz and I set out to develop, I talked to IDW, they're their own season 3. And Chris knew all the stuff better than I did. He had very strong opinions about it, and I realized that whether I created the stuff or written it, he knew it better, and I was almost irrelevant and had to catch up. Okay, that's a very strange sensation to have. Okay, you know, I mean, I'm just looking at it going, you know, because I mean, when I was writing Ashtray, you know, I mean, there was no Ashtray to it. There's not a character called Ashtray, but I just don't talk about the same characters. But you know, I may have written Ashtray and voiced him, done his bios and all that. When I was writing it, there was no Ashtray toy. That came out later. And then there are all these continuities later. The reality all came later. And so it's this very weird feeling of it's actually sort of like being a parent. You know, I mean, you think you create this thing and you can totally control it, and it's like sitting there in diapers and all that, you know, and then you know, about 20 years later, I'm having this experience right now. About 20 years later, my daughter's over at SDSR before I came over here, and she knows all sorts of stuff I'll never know. And it has all sorts of capabilities and competencies I don't have, and it's like, where'd that come from? You know, and that's what happened at the property. So when I go back and look at the stuff now, you know, my perception of Transformers, it's not, you know, I'm not the important part of this. The important part of it is what the property is. It's turned into this multifaceted thing that's now tiered for every level of engagement and every level of involvement. And it's something so much larger than the sum of the parts that, you know, because that's the other thing we haven't talked about is how just the concept of intellectual property ultimately changed. And there was a whole thing in the 90s, the era we're talking about, that deserves mention, and that is that, you know, like Bruce Timm and Paul Reed did that run of Batman and all that, you know, that defined a whole new kind of animation nobody had ever seen before. You know, it was the kind of apotheosis of what we were doing. Because we were just starting, we were just starting in the 80s to, you know, when I got to animation, you know, people were just animation writers and didn't do much else. Then around the time Sunbuller got infiltrated by comic book writers. Okay, Steve Gerber's guy created Howard the Duck. For comic books, he was also the story editor of G.I. Joe. Okay, so all of a sudden you start bringing all these kind of Marvel and Len Wein, all these kind of legendary comic book guys. And they were the guys that thought in terms of continuity and all that. I was the only game guy because I was working with Gary Gygax learning how to design games. Because you couldn't make a living designing games in those days, so I was doing shows. But what I was obsessed by that nobody else cared about. So when we were watching Prime Target the other night, is I was worried about I wanted to play a version of Transformers versus the environment. It's like games or the PvP or PvP. Well, I wanted to be a player versus the environment in there. That's why we had all these traps and all that. Because what I was thinking about was the play sets and what the game worked. The point is you have all these people from different mediums coming in. That's what started. The third season of Transformers had a shocking amount of continuity. And if you look at the other, even though it's the Visionaries, which were the last two shows we did, by necessity had a weird continuity because they were released as 7-minute segments on a show called Super Sunday. And then all 3 7-minute segments had to add up to an episode of the show, and then 5 episodes, or 15 7-minute segments, had to end up as a miniseries, right? And so the whole thing was constructed. And then once you get these plot lines, like nobody cared. There was no adult supervision. We didn't have a network pushing us to reset everything. So we started experimenting. Really, it's a very modern format. You have the A story, the B story, and the B story gets promoted to the A story. You start building with a B story, and you have a C story, and running kind of underneath. I always thought it was a music charge. But anyway, long story. But the point is, all this stuff really evolved. And then parallel to this, what you were talking about, the technology was evolving with it. And that was a whole nother dimension. And I've never figured out why we don't make shows out of game engines. Some of the stuff I've seen in game engines is as good as the animation I've seen. And then you just endlessly driving around and do shows with a joystick. But I think, these mediums don't necessarily play well together even though you want to.
Two things I'll follow up with. So on the one hand, it's really interesting to hear you say that there were no adult supervision. Because I hadn't thought about this before, but by the time I got involved, these were no longer just like a little offshoot of sell toys, whatever you guys want to do, go do. This was now Transformers, the movie, this was a brand. So there were now a lot of rules about the stuff I worked on. Men in Black and Jumanji and Godzilla and Starship Troopers, there were featured people involved who wanted to oversee to some degree. There were rights holders. So all of a sudden there were lots of
you have 500 stakeholders. No, it's nothing but adults who Dipstick would never, insult, Nozzle, it's really, it's really obnoxious.
It's a really interesting change.
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to point out is, we're talking about the change in technology, which influenced the change in storytelling. Another big change is, so you grew up in the 70s, you watch your show once a week, right? It's on Saturday morning. It'll repeat a couple of times during the year, but in general, you're watching on Saturday morning. You get to the 80s, you get into this syndication model, where a show is running 5 days a week. So you now can do a little bit more continuity. Yeah, it's not encouraged necessarily because they really want to be able to order them, to play them in any order possible. But there's still a possibility for more continuity because for younger viewers, they can track across a week. They can't track from 1 week to the next. Then you get into this idea of DVDs, and before that VHS. So now you can get the fans can go back and look at everything across a whole. And so now you get super fans. It's the first time that I depended upon Saturday morning alone once a week to watch the thing. And now you have streaming, where almost all shows have continuity, almost because this idea is you binge it. Now you don't watch it once a week, you don't watch it 5 days a week, you don't watch it across a couple of weeks, the whole DVD box. You watch it in one sitting.
You watch it 8 hours, or 8 episodes, 4 hours
and if
straight.
you want to, for the first time ever, you can watch the latest Transformers series. I don't even know which one they're up to now. And then you can go back and watch the 20 previous ones, all in the same week.
Yep.
And you can get this massive download of history of whatever this brand you're into is. That was never possible before. So if the beginnings of the DVD thing spawned super fans, then I don't even know what kind of optional fans you get now, who can just ingest every iteration of it simultaneously.
You get mutants because you throw into that. You have all these different, game expressions. So now the players can actually be the characters, and especially role-playing games. So and then they have their personal mythology about the character mixed in with what with canon. And there was this time where it was very important to keep canon because there was a thing called transmedia. It's still around, and their principles are good. But what that usually meant is you would get somebody who would, I studied transmedia, and I was in the department, and they would attempt to control the whole thing. It's like the worst of the network stuff. Only you just get some tyrannical person there, and so it's just the way the world works. It's like it starts out with total freedom and anarchy, and that's what we got in the 80s. Hasbro just sent it sent us bottles of plastic and a red vial, okay, and it just do that. Then it got to
that's his beginning. My beginning of Transformers Prime was a 600-page. This is the
Bible,
canon
yes.
Bible, which didn't make it. A lot of it worked, but a lot of it contradicted each other because it was based on different iterations. So the job was fix this.
Yeah,
reboot.
Exactly. And that's what, oddly enough, and it's funny when Chris and Diablo comes up. Well, part of my job was Diablo 3 was after 2, obviously there was Diablo 1 and 2. It's totally inconsistent stories. You had the internal Blizzard wiki, which was horribly inaccurate and all that, and then you had the fan wiki, which was more accurate, but none of it made any sense. And I finally read a lore book, and the lore book I was an ancient history major, so I wrote it like Herodotus. Well, some people believe that this happened. It was all written with an unreliable narrator talking about, stories nobody really knows. And fans seem to like it because we weren't even pretending it was consistent. We were just saying, this might have happened or this, because what we were referring to were things that actually happened in the first 2 games that totally conflicted with each other. Because that's really important, because people live these worlds now. Star Trek was the first thing that I saw in my lifetime where people got religious about it. First, the G1 Star Trek, with Shatner. And then it happened with everything. I was doing a Superman game for the Bryan Singer version of Superman. And they didn't have a Bible, they didn't have a 600-page thing, because there's so many continuities of Superman. And Superman's not a guy. Batman I knew really well. The Superman I didn't know that well. And so they sent Marvel, they hired him, he was the Bible. Okay, so Marv would show up and tell you whether this was okay for your continuity. Because, they finally broke down and just realized that, it would be a 2,500-page Bible that would argue with itself, so we'll send Marv instead. And so we hung out doing that. But
You just described it for us.
well, yeah, it is exactly the Torah. Because
Rabbis are still arguing about it every day.
They're still arguing about it, and it's like, well, I don't think we really think Moses wrote all of this, but nevertheless, it is a compilation we accept as true. Which is why you had to invent the Holy Spirit later on, for Christianity, because then you had to have an intercessory who would magically sit between you and the text and tell you what the truth was, because there was no truth. In the case of Superman, it was Mark, but in the Bible, it's the Holy Spirit. The sequel, but but it's true. And you learn. You want to understand how properties evolve. Just take a look at the Bible. It's absolutely perfect.
So there was a point that was brought back.
Sorry, we might have gotten a little far.
No, it's great. I love it. So it was good. Obviously, we just heard him speak. Honestly, pretty highly of how Transformers evolved, how all the crazy places going, and how your sort of take on that. Jeff, I want to kind of lean it to you because you're coming from a different place. You had, when it came to Transformers or a couple other existing properties already, you had your Bible for, to continue with that analogy. Given that you've worked on these things, what is it like to look back at sort of the origins, right? What is it like to look at the primordial views at which your iteration of whatever you were working on came to be?
So I think what you're asking is, so when I come into something and I get that 600 pages or whatever it is, look, first and foremost, I think one of the reasons that I've been able to work for as long as I have in this is because I came to it as a fan. I only got involved in animation because I grew up with it, loving it. I am one of those people. So the idea of like, oh yeah, can you come in and help us kind of reboot the Transformers, or can you try to bring the Magic Universe to media, or whatever it is? That to me is like, yeah, I'll do that. What Phil was describing, this idea, so you get this Bible, or you have various people at the brands who are telling you what the history is. Typically, if we're going to do a TV show, our job is to sort of reboot it in a way that will appeal to an even broader audience than it's had before. Because as many people as see the Transformers movies, the idea is that television is success, more people are going to see it, right? It's going to be even more. And you have much more time to tell much more. He's got 2 hours, and it's mostly dealing with the action stuff. We've got characters. We're really trying to get deep on character. So it continues to be a challenge. You're still fighting all those battles that Vince talked about, because we'll want to make RC an important character, maybe that, for whatever reason, at that moment, that's not what the brand wants, or we want to do something with one of the characters that isn't quite in canon. So it becomes a little bit of a back and forth and a horse trade. But ultimately, when I get hired, before I get hired to do these things, what I tell the brands that are employing me is, I'm going to try to give you everything you need, but I am probably not going to give you everything you want. And you're probably going to be pissed off at me periodically. But that's what you got to know going in, because at the end of the day, I'm there to protect the show. I'm not there to protect Hasbro, I'm not there to protect the network, or whatever it is. As soon as I say yes to something, I am now one with the show. And that is all I'm doing. So there have been some pretty knocked out and drag out fights over the years, and angry emails and all the rest of it.
No, that doesn't.
I know, well, I'm just very but it all comes from a place of love, honestly. Like if you didn't care, you wouldn't do that. It's much easier to say yes. Much easier to say, yeah, no, of course we'll just create a truck to carry the Transformers, even though they're all vehicles. Like, yes, we will do that.
Make it like a truck. I think we still got a couple of minutes. I'm just going to do a time check very professional. Yeah, we still got a couple of minutes if anyone else has anything that they want to bring up. We've got one in the back.
You can just shout it if you want, we'll hear you.
Project.
I'll see what I can do. You said you ended up getting the chance to work on Tiny Toons in the late 80s. I know it ended up moving to network later on in its run. Did you have any difficulty working with the networks as opposed to running it in syndication?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so what happened is I wrote Tiny Toons when it was a movie, and then I went over to a meeting and Steven says, well, I got good news and bad news, which you want? I said, I'll give you the bad news first. He said, look, we can't make this a movie. I have to deal with Warner Brothers, and we got to deal with you with DuckTales, so we'll make it a TV show. And I said, all right, what's the good news? He said, well, I've got this Bible movie I need you to rewrite, and so then we kind of went over to Bible Goes West. I'm a character, oddly enough, in Tiny Toons. Like, episode 49 was a character called a dumb guy named written by my later at Amblin writing partner on movies, a woman named Sherry Stoner, who was one of the people who ran Tiny Toons and Animaniacs.
She was also an actress.
Sherry was more than an actress. At the exact moment that she and I were working on, I'm trying to remember what we were working on, but she was the body model for both Ariel and Belle. In other words, Sherry would go into a tank and swim around, and they'd rotoscope Sherry because she was a little early. And there were shots in there where you just see her move, and that's Sherry. It doesn't look like any character, but she was a writing, which is in Hollywood politics. It's just kind of funny that you're the body model for Ariel, and you're writing for Steven Spielberg. Because at that point, Disney and Hamlet are eternity DreamWorks.
So, trivia you probably know, but she was also in a Woman in Prison movie.
Yes,
where she
yes.
was
Reform School Girls or something like that. Yes, she was very embarrassed by that. For a number of reasons. Yes, no, Steven said Sherry neither one. And Jeffrey read a movie, and she was talking about Reform School Girls. I said, oh, you need a page. No, Sherry's great. But never actually seen the film. I kind of told her I wouldn't see the film, so I didn't see it. But yeah,
She gets branded.
because later on, when Beauty and the Beast came out, I mean, because we had 5 came out the same weekend, we got killed by Beauty and the Beast, but Linda was telling the LA Times, finally it's for about it in her book. I mean, she finally put it in the blurb in the back of the book that she based the Beast on. And then Sherry's the voting model for Belle. And so Sherry sent me a piece of the storyboard and says, well, here we are. Because so I kind of felt as invested in Beauty and the Beast or embedded in Beauty and the Beast as well. But yeah, I don't know where any of that goes. But yeah, that was the other backbeat. I mean, actually, we can tie this into the 90s because the Disney animated movies picked up full steam in that period. Kind of started. You could argue Oliver and Company because that was Baby Boomer Echo, but whatever. That was the other thing that was happening, by the way. Is this was when all baby boomers were having kids, and they were all the right age to be watching this stuff. So we had a huge demographic bump where the kids that followed all of these shows. And I would argue that things got more adult as the core, as that echo kind of went, through this thing, right?
There's probably also, and this is something I hadn't talked about before, but over the years, kids being in control of purse strings of their parents giving their kids more stuff, buying more, doing more for their kids, becoming the focus of parents' lives. That was also starting to really pick up around that time. So you had, the kids suddenly had more economic power. Mom, I want.
Yep.
So you got those commercials selling toys.
There's one other thing which gets just right now is you mentioned Freddie Silverman at the very beginning of this meeting. Okay, Freddie Silverman, I mean, he was the guy that came up with least offensive option or something like that. Right? I mean, because remember, Freddie Silverman starts out as a subversive actor. ABC was in the toilet. That's like Hollywood talk. Things are always in the toilet, right? ABC was not doing well. And so they did all these daring shows, which are no small part of the fandom you're seeing today. It was things like Batman, Green Hornet, Time Tunnel, they just bullshit. What? Very possibly. That I don't know. Yeah, I think so. Because remember, Kolchak was set in Chicago. Yeah. And I mean, it would have kind of a WGN feel to it, oddly enough. Anyway, so the whole philosophy of television is you wanted to be the show that nobody in the family would say, I'm not watching it. Okay? Which leads to common denominator. I mean, you either had to have somebody that, and this was, like 70s, 80s kind of idea. Then TVs got cheaper, and so families had multiple TVs, right? So then you didn't, the programming changed a little bit, and that happened right around cable. And also there's so many more options with cable. Now with streaming, it's not about the least offensive show. It is if you have enough fanatics. I mean, just think about the math. If you're paying $19.95 or you pay for Netflix every month, right? If they do a show that would get 1 million people to spend $19.95, that's $19 million, $950,000 a month that show is bringing in. No show has, because people are willing to watch that show and not cancel their Netflix. So the shows have gotten more narrow and narrow and narrow. Not that anybody doesn't want a big hit, but now people are watching on their pads. We've gone from in one TV in the whole house world to, I watch it on my phone.
So everybody's there.
Ubiquitous things, and so it's very personal, and also nobody's monitoring what people are watching. In other words, there was stuff you would put on in the living room of your house when you have only one TV that you're sitting there watching your phone with your earbuds, nobody knows what it is. And so it's gone from a very public medium to a very private medium. And you can have some really weird little geeky esoteric show that nobody cares about. But you've got 1 million people who care about it, they all talk about it on the internet. And so it takes on this life that, because it used to be, there were like shows that if you hadn't watched it, there's something wrong with the 80s. If you were watching Moonlighting or Miami Vice, or we're at least conversing. I almost never watched it, but I made it my business to know what would happen. There was something wrong with it. And now it's not like that. I mean, it's like I don't even find out about shows until you guys tell me about it. You know what I mean? Or I just happen to see it on some banner because Netflix and Prime are incredibly bad at knowing what I want to watch.
I don't think that's just true for
but I mean, think about it. I mean, you know, I worked at Google for 5 years. You know, for when we're at Niantic, right? I was a company called Niantic before this. We did GeoAware, augmented, sometimes alternate reality games, and we were inside of Google, and you know, you would hear constant data analysis and all that, and I realized these guys still can't tell me what show I want to watch. You know, I mean, and I'm shooting fish in a barrel. You can't figure it out for me. You can't figure it out for anyone. You know, and which makes me question a lot of stuff about data. Don't underestimate how data is influencing everything you're watching now. And when the algorithms are that bad, it's kind of interesting because I mean it's usually data used to selection too, which is another interesting thing. But they're not selecting for a big hit. They're selecting for something people are fanatic of in 1995 and ignore that they're not watching anything else on their service.
So here's one thing to think about separate from the kids' business necessarily. You know, the way they measure audiences for TV or historically Nielsen, whatever, it's a percentage of the people who have TV, they're watching your show, and then what does that translate to in actual numbers? So as late as the 90s, shows that were getting maybe like 20 million viewers were still getting canceled.
Yep.
You now stay on the air with 300,000 viewers, 400,000 viewers at the network level. And the shows are 2, 3, 4 times more expensive per episode than they ever used to be. And the ad rates have gone up somehow over the last year. I don't understand that part of the ecosystem.
It's all trying to figure it out. Well, okay, you look at it. Johnny Carson Tonight Show, you know, what, 34 million viewers on a good night. 34 million views. Okay, you know, there was kind of shocking news last week. Greg Gutfeld just topped out all the other guys on cable, late night. Okay, that's a niche show. If you're that niche, I mean, they get like 1 million viewers. And you know, so what it was, I mean, just think of the cultural impact of if you showed up on Johnny Carson, theoretically a third of America had seen it, you know, adult America had seen it the night before. You show up now, it's, you know, 6, you know, bots and 9 people see your show. Or somebody did a search by what you have. I mean, it's a really different model, and people are trying to figure out what the model is, exactly what they're trying to do and why they're doing it.
Ooh.
Little glass jump in there.
Want to go back into our room and
Rude.
Need my shorts.
Yeah, since I created the characters like in the mid to late 2000s, we were like, why don't we just set the show during that time period? Why not? And then my immediate thought was, that means I can give all the characters flip phones.
Don't need this.
My phone.
Get it, boy. Good boy.
This is why we pay you handsomely.
This is why you're a salaried employee.
Because I have to fix everything.
Oh, honey, that's a tall order.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess, I mean, we could just show off the thing.
You don't want to hear us talk. You want to see the show.
Let's see what you guys have been working on, because I'm sure we're all very excited to see that, and then we can dive more into discussion after the fact.
Heck yeah.
It'll probably be easier too, because if you have more questions, then you can, after it goes into your eyes and ears.
Probably. I had some stuff about the proof of concept, but this is going to be way better. Proof of concept looks great, by the way.
Now, before you play it, mind you, so this is this is the 8-minute pilot, but it is still obviously in the works. So it's a combination of It's a combination of storyboards, broadcast animation, music, all the voicing. So everything will make sense, obviously, but there's still a lot more work to do. Essentially.
Yeah, it's like 60% done.
We joked it was like 63.5% or something.
So a lot of the stuff you see are still placeholders and stuff like that, but...
So if it jumps from like really high quality to just like sketches, you'll know why.
Yeah. But we hope you guys like it. Let's hope the audio works.
Come on. Okay. Hello, all you beautiful people. Quinn here on the set of our groundbreaking music video. Hope you're sitting back in your seats, because Sesamoid are about to knock you right off the air.
Hey, would you put that thing down and actually help? It's not getting any lighter out here.
Oh, Warren, this is all part of the process. People are dying to see behind the scenes just as much as hear our music itself.
What people?
Oh. I'm just laying the breadcrumbs for when we make it big. Isn't that right, Rue?
Yeah, of course. Everyone loves a good origin story, right?
Yeah, and they usually start with hard work. So make yourself useful.
Hey, Quinn!
Hmm?
Wedding party or desecrated corpse?
Oh, duty calls. Think fast. Coming, Piper!
Typical. Why do you bother with any of this?
Oh, you making friends, Kira?
Sorry! I guess they don't make trees like they used to.
Oh, right. People, this is our lead singer and lighting expert, Griff.
Huh, lighting expert. You hear that, Kira? I got a promotion. Oh.
Hey, get back here, Kira!
Now that I'm walking around in it, not really feeling desecrated corpse.
Yeah. Bet it would look perfect on Warren, though.
Not on your life.
Come on. Don't you want to feel dead on the outside, too?
Look, I'll wear that thing as soon as Griff learns how to fly.
Griff! Oh my God! Are you okay?
Yeah, my bones broke my fall.
We need to get out of here. Now.
Excuse me? We haven't even started shooting now, Buckley!
Damn weighted fabric!
Alright, let's go.
Hey! Damn it, Warren! I need those!
Today you don't.
I have legs, you know!
Can you tell us what the hell is going on?
Trust me, we want to be anywhere but here right now.
Well, I'm not going anywhere without my costumes! I can make new ones. Go!
Nice one, Piper! Talk about a power couple!
faster? Oh, sure. Grab me a pint of horsepower. It's right back there next to the popsicles.
Wait, Kira, no! Not dogs!
Freaking head off! Warren, any chance you learned how to fly? Huh? Oh, come on! Phew. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Guys, please, we have to go back for Kira.
Boom.
Hey, buddy! Sorry to drop in unannounced, but hey, guess what? I got a promotion today! Yeah, I know. Look, I promise. I'll bring you extra bagels next time.
That's about right.
Oi, taco-san! Natane! What a nice guy.
Horse.
Oh, Kira.
Rue, did you get all that on tape?
I think so?
Holy shit. We're sitting on a gold mine. Just wait till the world gets a load of it.
Nope.
Just wait. There's after credits.
Of course.
We're sitting on a gold mine. Just wait till the world gets a load of it.
Oh no, Quinn. Wait until you get a load at this. Worth it.
Yeah.
And that's it. You can all go home.
Yeah, that's all. Bye.
No, stay here. And I'll have to leave. But
Those credits for con exclusive too, obviously, but
yeah, we have a huge team, but obviously not all of them have put in their work yet, or at least haven't finished their work yet. So we just wanted to credit like the people who were in it so far, and we're like, oh, there's way more time for credits than this.
Yeah.
What do we do? And Dave's like, I have a plan.
The mastermind behind it all.
So what'd you think? 3 out of 10?
That was absolutely grand. That was marvelous.
Hell yeah. But yeah, that is our baby so far, at least.
You.
A very important question.
I have a very important answer.
When the werewolf gets hit with the guitar, is that going to stay in the...
That's not the final effect, I'm sorry. We joked about maybe like layering that bonk under
We really are attached to that bonk noise now, so we kind of want to layer it really deep down quietly in the mix. So if you're listening for it, you can still find it.
It's going to sound like somebody hitting you in the face with a guitar, but maybe we'll hide that bonk like deep down. You.
Hidden bonk.
So, how indestructible is that ice cream truck?
So we we joked that it's constantly being fixed, right? So, as you can tell in this, it loses both its doors, the glass is smashed out, Griff falls on it twice, but we joke that in the first episode, which we think takes place like a month after this pilot, Warren had just finished repairing it again. And so we're going to keep some of the battle damage from this pilot in the first episode for continuity. But Papa Squirrel is an omnipotent being, so he'll survive.
Papa Squirrel cannot be killed.
We cannot confirm or deny any anomalous properties of the ice cream van.
Also, I mean, part of the joke too, I mean, well, obviously Griff falls on it twice, as I said. If you notice that both times it either starts or stops the music, so we joke that he's like, his pain is the key to start and stop the music.
Eventually it gets to a point when the music starts and Warren can't get it to stop, he just grabs Griff and just shucks him against the side of the ice cream truck.
So from what I noticed from the pilot and everything, is this like a world full of monsters that people sort of know about, or is it kind of like these are things like the big tentacle thing that dude was all chummy with?
Yeah.
Like, yes and no. It's a lot like how our world kind of like operates now, where it's like, you know, you go to places like Roswell and everyone there is like, yeah, we got aliens, and the rest of the world's like, yeah, you got aliens, sure, wink, and they're like, no, we got aliens, and just like, okay,
also,
sure, whatever.
it's a combination, like monsters, like the kaiju in Taco is like something that just lives in in Valeport, which is the town this takes place in. But then some of the other monsters there's more lore reasons as to why they exist, which will actually, once this is done, will be a little bit more clear. I don't want to spoil that, but
yeah, there's something unique about the monsters in our pilot.
Yeah, there's a reason why they're so mutated and stuff. So, yes.
I have a statement and a question. My statement is that popsicles joke got me so hard. That was so
I'm glad, because that's like the joke I was like the most anxious about working. That I'm glad.
We had to do about 1 million takes with Jonah Scott to get that one just right.
I knew that I wanted Warren to have one funny line, and I was like, all right.
Yeah, we were running into an issue where like we had written the whole thing out, and we're like, Warren doesn't have a funny moment. Like he has some kind of like humorous bits of him being a grumpy dad, but nothing like truly laugh out loud funny. And like, we need something, and it's like, well, it has to be yelling at Quinn, obviously.
Yes. Warren and Quinn have a very strenuous friendship. They love each other, but they get on each other's nerves constantly.
They're just an old married couple, really.
Yeah, they're 3 kids and dog.
Mom, dad, and the 3 children.
Yeah. It's a show about family. And that's what's really important.
Oh, shut up.
I have one more thing.
Yes.
Who did the design for the mask that Drain wore? That's such a cool mask.
I did the original concepts for it, and it didn't really change too much from that. But Max Monroy, they do their own comic called Vamp Sabbath, I believe, if you've heard of that. They are the lead character designer for all of our human characters. And so they did the final design on that.
We wanted something very like Dead Mouse, Marshmallow-esque.
Yeah.
But the joke was also is that, because I don't want to say too much about Drain, because you get to really...
The boy at the end there is named Drain, and I call him an EDM vampire, F-word boy.
Piss boy.
Piss boy.
Well, you'll learn a lot more about him in the first actual episode, but what we can say is that he like really tries to go for the vampire thing, and that doesn't always work out for him. So yeah, you'll see.
Yeah, it doesn't always work out too great.
Maestro, do you have any inquiries?
I actually do want to exert a little, I do have a question, and it's sort of tethered back to the last question that was made, but I want to expand a little bit. Like, Ashley, you were saying that these were characters based on designs you made when you were like, what, 12, you said?
So Rue and Kira I made when I was 12,
Yeah.
and Quinn I designed about 6 years ago, but...
Piper, Warren, Griff, and Papa Swirl we worked together to make,
Yeah,
but
we
the
made
rest of
them
them were when she was a
collaboratively.
kid.
Yeah. My question is, obviously these are fairly old concepts. Like these are things that are just like, oh, I made these characters, but I haven't, like, to my knowledge, you haven't really done anything with them until now. What got you to be like, oh, I want to do something with these guys? And to the rest of the panel, what got you guys to be like, yeah, we can make a show out of this. It's gonna be weird and great.
Oh, that's a fun story.
I don't want to be mean.
No, you can be mean. It's fine. I deserve it. These are characters I had had for a very long time, and I had always just kind of clung to. They were kind of comforting for me, and so they always just stuck around. And I remember sometime in like 2015, no, not even longer ago than that, like sometime in like 2013. I was talking to my boyfriend at the time, and I was showing him my revamped designs of Kira, and I was like, do you think I could ever do anything with this? And he goes, hell no, that's one of the ugliest designs you have. And I was like,
bruh,
I am going to ruin you. And so now it is becoming a show, but mainly, aside from spite, what pushed me to really get the show going is to kind of bring the mood down slightly. I was in a really, really dark place in 2019. That was a really, really bad year for me. And I wasn't doing very well mentally, physically. I had recently lost both my parents, and I had just broken up with my fiance. So to say things were not fun would be an understatement. And so I was like, I need something for me. I need something that I can focus on and kind of give me a reason to keep going. Because right now I feel like I have nothing. And so I was like, I don't care if this concept seems stupid or lame or anything like that to anyone else. I need this for me, and this makes me happy, so I'm gonna go through with it. And so I jumped right into it, and I had no idea what I was doing. And that's when...
Hello, Dolly.
I approached you probably sometime late 2019, mid 2019?
It was right at the tail end of... It was like right at the tail end of the production of Has Been, right?
Yeah, it was like right as Has Been was wrapping.
And you mentioned, he's like, hey, I have this little like show I'm trying to do. Would you maybe mind helping me write some of it? And I'm like,
because I can't write.
And that was for the little proof of concept that came out a while ago. And I was like, sure. And I will wholeheartedly admit that at the time, because I was just like, I had my own things going on, like issues and work. I was just like, sure, yeah, no problem. And
No, go back.
No, I wrote the script for you.
No, but I remember I asked, hey, do you want to help me with this show? And you're like, I don't know, I'm kind of busy.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a lie. I wasn't trying to say like, because here's the honest thing, and I mentioned this yesterday at my panel. When the proof of concept came out, I was like, yeah, but I didn't really have, from what it was of just like Rue, Kira, Quinn, and just nothing going on, I was like, there's not much you can do with this. And I meant that in a genuine writer friend kind of way of like, there's just, you can make this like a little like cute cartoon, but as a narrative series, there's really not much you can do with this.
And I was like, Dave, please help.
And then I was like, all right, what if we made it about a rock band and an ice cream truck and a world of monsters with a purple dog that comes out of her head? And you're like,
yeah, that sounds cool.
Okay. And it just turned this thing where we both got really excited and just threw everything at the wall.
And I always give Dave shit for this because, in the beginning he was like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And now, Dave talks about this show more than I do.
Yeah.
This show is your baby.
Well, no, it's completely...
It's both of ours.
Yes, we have a very... We give each other crap because we have a very good partnership in the way where, like, anything that we like or don't like, we're very clear on in making this show, and we just throw everything at the wall. But it turned into a thing where it was like, we just started like for a year before I had moved back out to California because I had gone home during the pandemic to work my old butcher job again. And we were just working remotely, and just everything just spilled out. And you were like, "You want to just move here and we'll make the show?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Be my live-in writing slave.
I'm tired of cutting up. I'm tired of cutting up meat in the grocery store. I'll do that.
And so now we've been living together for a while now, and every day I'll just be in my office, and Dave will come down and be like, "Writing time," and I'm like, "Oh God, I woke up 5 minutes ago, please."
But it's very fun because, like, you know, her having Kira and Rue and Quinn for a while, and it's very fun because, like, a little bits of the designs changed, obviously, and as we learned more about the world and the other characters, bits of their personalities kind of became more clear to work with the other characters. And before we knew it, we had this, like, goofy, you know, family dynamic of misfits in, like, a wannabe rock band. And we were like, it's just, I also, like, I have, like, an affinity for some reason of, like, I like stories about teenagers and young adults going up against genuine, like, supernatural villainy for some reason. I mean, it's probably my love of, like, Ghostbusters and stuff, but,
Supernatural.
And like one of the things that I had always wanted and always noticed is, like, you don't see monsters in animated properties. You just don't.
No.
Not at least in the classical sense. And I was like, I want to be the change that I want to see.
Also, like, as soon as we figured out, like, Quinn was a drummer, I'm like, I want him to throw the drumstick in the eye of something. And that's there. Like, yes.
I thought Quinn was legitimately gonna like shoot an attack for a minute.
Oh yeah, it's great. That's our board artist Kai, who is just okay. So I don't know if you noticed this, but that shot and then the shot where actually literally right here, that's the Dio pose Piper's doing. That's because our board artist Kai is a giant weeb. So
he was like, "Can I put JoJo's in it?" And I'm like, "If I tell you no, you're gonna do it anyway. Go.
Can't stop it.
We can't stop you."
That's gonna look cool, cleaned up that one.
Oh yeah, I got a bunch of the like layout keys going here, so you can have a more clear idea of what things are gonna look
Also,
like.
like, very much, if you can kind of see with the design, Kira is, like, very much modeled after, like the Thing or, like, Cronenberg creatures and stuff that she turns into. And the whole idea of her, like, kind of demonicness is more of, like, she's a demon of Rue's mind, which is, I'm not going to say why, but there's a reason why Rue starts to, like, grab her head and have a panic attack during all this, so. That's it.
That's the thought.
Did that answer your question from, like, 20 minutes
I
ago?
don't even remember what the question was anymore.
I mean, the question was how everybody else got roped into this.
Oh, they didn't answer that at all. Well, actually, I guess so. Yeah, no.
I mean, it did.
Here.
In a roundabout way.
As far as how I got...
How did we acquire you?
Yeah. As far as how I got roped into this, Ashley and I were working together on Lackadaisy. Ashley is one of the lead cleanup artists on there, and as I said, I'm the lead 3D artist. Farfetch started getting underway, and Ashley and I were already, pretty great personal friends. And she thought I could be utilized very similarly as I am on the Lackadaisy team.
We're gonna show.
You're just
This
loud.
Is so much. We're gonna show.
The man knows how to project.
Newt is a brilliant 3D artist. We're gonna show off some of his handiwork right here. His turnaround of Papa Squirrel with all the instruments and stuff.
So, for example, so that the animators don't have to actively, this is actually with the old shader. I sent you a video as well with all of the new shader work.
I totally forgot to download it. I'm sorry. I love you.
It's on Discord, Ash.
I don't have internet.
But, what the hotel is?
I try my best.
The head does.
So that the animators don't have to deal with complex geometry when they're animating, so that, say, as the car transitions from one end of the screen to the other, and it might have a complex maneuver of turning, or there might be characters interacting with it. For example, that's a lot of complex geometry that you have to keep in perspective, moving smoothly through the scene dynamically. So rotoscoping or directly animating in a 3D prop is something that's been done since Bambi. All of the antlers in Bambi were 3D props that were rotoscoped over. The vehicles in Cruella de Vil, for example, were all physical 3D models that were animated over in real time. So this is basically that, so they don't have to animate any physical props in the short.
We don't like to make our animators suffer too much. I say that as I remember the shot where the bat pulls Griff out of the car, and I'm sorry to whoever I assign that to. One of my favorite games is looking at which shots are the most complex and going, who on my team do I want to torture?
When we were early writing the script, and we decided, because actually early on, I'm sorry to use the microphone more script. Very early on, the actual idea was it was going to be like a 2 to 3 minute short about just the gang in the woods with a little like Blair Witch style camera kind of recording their antics. And then I was like,
what if it was an 8-minute pilot instead? And then it turned from, and you actually were the one to suggest, like, maybe it would be better if we kept cutting back and forth from the handheld camera to the 16:9. But the one thing I wanted to keep was that shot of the Griff being pulled out by, we call the bat Iris, one eye. I wanted to keep that so badly because I knew that shot would look really dope.
Which it does.
Yeah.
It does look dope.
I don't know, I just like, this is dumb, I just like people hitting monsters in the face with instruments. I just think it's funny. Apparently I'm the only one.
No, we just agree.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much of like not thinking funny. I think it's just one of those like, yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree. It's just like, yeah, if you want to hit
Because
something.
like, I think
It's like hitting Bigfoot with a banjo, right? It's just somehow
right,
separate
yeah, it's
from-
like, because that was the thing, is that we very much wanted to have, and actually like, you can see in the concept art and layout art, the monsters to actually genuinely look intimidating, but, you know, the fact that they're taken out by a small girl with a guitar and a Quinn with a drumstick to the eye, it kind of, I don't know, they probably feel bad when they die. They're like, oh, this is how I'm going out? Okay. And then Taco, we love Taco.
Taco's our baby boy. We love him.
Yes, there is a kaiju living in the town. Because so the town is called Valeport, like that everything takes place in the show, and it's very much like a port town with like, you know, like boardwalks, kind of a small town vibe with the cityscape. There's a big harbor area, and we're like, what if there was just like kind of like a Loch Ness thing? There was just a big, friendly Godzilla-like creature who lived there that Griff just happens to know.
Griff knows everyone.
Yeah, the only reason they're aligned was because Griff knew it. Yeah. We could talk about the music. Why do I have the microphone and you don't?
So one of the other things that's been really fun that we're wanting to do with this show is we of course have a band. You guys got to hear one of the band, Sesamoid's, songs at the very end there in the credits. That is a song sung by Griff's voice actor, Jacob Takanashi. He does the voice acting for Griff as well as all the singing. And one of the things that we really want to do is, since we have this virtual band, we want them to legitimately release actual music alongside the show. So we're hoping, alongside the pilot or episode 1, I can't remember. Alongside the release of episode 1, we're hoping to release a 5-track EP with all original songs by Sesamoid, the band and the show.
and there's obviously that little like 50-second credit song is supposed to be by the band, but then also in episode 1 there's going to be a full song that they do that's kind of like, without spoiling anything, it's kind of like a montage sequence. So you'll get to hear that, and then a couple other originals we're going to put on an EP to coincide putting it out. So people are like, okay, well that's something to hold me over, because we know this stuff takes time. So you know, putting it out in between the things is probably for the best.
Oh, we could also show off the opening theme song.
Okay, Ashley, let's show off the opening theme song.
Well, I'm just saying, if people want to hear it.
I think that sounds marvelous, and I would love to hear the opening
Thank
theme song.
you.
It's what I'm
I don't know what you're talking. I'm agreeing with you positively.
You're mocking me.
No. Oh, thank you. We really want to, one thing we're going to try to do in between the pilot release and the episode 1 release is we want to do, like, we want to put out obviously that's the theme song for the show, but we want to do, like, the opening, like, sequence, like, animated, the show between.
The anime opening.
The anime opening, yeah. Kind of just to hold people over between the two. So, and with comics and stuff. So there's going to be a lot of music, a lot of monsters, a lot of bad jokes about bones. By the way, does anybody know what, for non-existent money, does anybody know what sesamoid means? You do?
Yeah, it's the bone in between two of your toes.
Correct. Which is really funny because if you search on Twitter, sesamoid, you either get stuff about our show or people's x-ray injury.
Non-breath.
Yep.
Between the metatarsals, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, that is.
Those are your toes, baby.
Those are your toes, darling.
Toes, sweetheart.
Mr. MC, do you have any more,
Honestly, I was kind of just confused by the fact that people here like were that aware about anatomy. I'm very
I'm very proud of you. I hope you know that.
Because I had no idea what a sesamoid was.
Maybe you're the
I was
first
like, that's a
one to
cool
ever
like.
pull it out.
Mom, medical school, consider.
Like I'm just.
Stepmom is a nurse.
Oh, there you go.
There it is.
You again.
I don't remember why, but for some reason, like a few days ago, the word sesamoid just popped into my head, and I wanted to look it up and figure out what it meant.
Dude.
So I should have done it.
We possessed your brain.
This is entirely my fault. I just like naming things after weird bones in the body. And when we found that one, I'm like, let's do this. And you're like, okay, I don't know what that means, but sure.
I mean, like, it totally works, because I'm just sitting here, I'm like, oh, sesamoid, that's like a cool, like, kind of weird band name. I love it. I dig it. I just think
It's
it was
also
a real
like,
thing.
it's unknowingly kind of humiliating to them too, because like, it's also like the lowest bone in your entire body, so it's literally like rock bottom. That's the joke. Somebody asked on a Q&A, they were like, so is the band like known like worldwide, or are they local? And I'm like, oh honey, they're not even local. Like Quinn would just throw cassette tapes into a radio station that get thrown in the garbage.
I hope you put that in the intro.
We should.
I really enjoyed that, was it Quinn that knew some Japanese and talked to the...
That was Griff,
grandma
yes.
today?
Yeah, Griff is fluent in Japanese.
I love that.
Because our voice actor, Jacob,
He was born in Japan.
he was.
Oh, excellent, me too.
With the very Japanese name of Jacob.
The very Japanese name of Griff.
I'm Japanese, half, and my name's James. They went with the
Oh, there you go.
Christian names.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, like, the exact translation is something along the lines of, like, thank you, taco. Originally, like, he did a bunch of takes, like, one of them was, like, see you at the recital or something, where it's like, okay, like...
Yeah, John Matane is like, see you again.
There you go, yeah.
Also, this is the humorous bone. I thought if there was ever a band competition, you could have the most unfunniest band named Humorous.
Stealing that. Stealing that.
Give him ideas!
Oh, I will say, so obviously, you know, you have Sesamoid and you have Drain, but there are other music groups in this world, and one of them is so stupid. And you'll meet them in episode 1.
We have a very interesting prospect.
Can you show them? You want to show them the poster? Just why not?
I have the poster here.
Okay.
I do. Do you?
Just hold up your phone.
Yeah. Well, no, but I can send it to you.
I don't have internet on this laptop here.
You're not even connected to the hotel?
No.
When I was fixing it,
I was, and then it stopped, and I'm too scared to figure it out.
Also, the three-headed werewolf's name is Boris for 2 reasons. One, like three-headed Sir Boris, but then also the color palette is modeled after a Russian bear. So we're just like, oh, that's funny. Like, yes.
Is he a Sir Boris?
If they're trying to like become famous, why don't they like paint the entire ice cream truck in a rainbow, or they can't, or can they not afford paint?
This Quinn's lazy.
That would explain it.
That was very complex. Thank you. How indestructible is Griff?
Okay, so we joke that Griff is the one character in the show that sort of operates by quote-unquote cartoon logic, where he will get hurt, obviously, but he'll shake it off very quickly.
That's his superpower.
And that's also where the whole grill thing comes into play, but we'll get into that eventually.
It's this generation's bone hurting.
Yes. But Griff is very, very durable. He takes a punch and he just smiles it off. So, you again.
So one of the musicians' name is Drain, right?
Yeah.
Is he a fan of Lady?
You're gonna have to inform me who that is. How do you spell what?
Yeah, spell it.
Oh, G-A-T-E.
There it is. Okay, so this is one of the bands in the show that you'll meet that are very dumb.
I can't see if it's.
There they are.
Cheese
Grater.
It looks oh my
Yeah, so yeah, the world has other bands as well.
They are a like speed death metal band, like, and the joke is that like they're like you know, like a Guar Necro Gobblecom, but they're like, yeah, thank you very much for listening, we appreciate it. Like, and our monster designer Cross did that poster, and I was like, yes.
And then my laptop died.
Perfect.
Oh no.
So we got to see everything that we needed to.
Perfect.
Well, we get to see a sequence where the game goes into a mansion and they go through a bunch of doors and come out right into doors like Scooby-Doo. Please.
But they're fully aware that it's random and they're confused as hell.
Yes.
Exactly. He gets it. Exactly.
I'm so tired of all these doors!
When you mentioned when the band plays the whole song, and it'd be a montage, that reminds me a lot of like the Archie show did that with songs, and they had a band too that they played, and then they did release records for like Sugar Sugar and all that, and that to me is like perfect homage to something that's classic like that.
Yeah, we actually like not even on purpose. We've noticed that we've had like a lot of weird like Hanna-Barbera homages in this, and I think it's just because it's like that formula of like, because back then like there were a lot of like the characters who were in like the little like rock band and stuff, but yeah, it would be very much like that.
We got somebody way over here who's been conversation.
So was the ice cream truck their first choice, or was that like the cheapest thing they could buy?
The cheapest thing they could buy.
And also, do they sell ice cream to help pay for certain things?
Okay,
It's classified.
It's classified. But I will say this. Obviously, the inside of the truck, they've like turned into like the band van, right? The soft serve machine is still a working machine. There's still melted ice cream in it, and kids do chase them. So.
You said during one of the streams, like it's funny if like children just got hit by the truck and they're trying to get ice cream.
I cannot confirm or deny if we've ever said that.
I plead the fifth. No, but we do have a thing where we know there is going to be a gag where children will be chasing them to try to get ice cream, even though Quinn at some point above the stop for children has spay paint with the word "don't" above it.
I keep pitching that eventually Quinn gets sick of it enough that he just punts kids in the head with ice cream.
we were
Dave keeps turning that one down. I'm not sure why.
We were discussing literally the other day what we're gonna do for one of the episodes with a sequence with when the kids come to get the ice cream, and we figured it out, and it basically ends up with a bunch of kids like trying to tip the truck over, and this poor the gang because like Warren hates this thing, but much like every other father, he just eventually over time is like, well, this is my thing, so it's gonna be mine, and just accepts his fate and fixes it. So
I actually kind of want to inject here. Sort of related to Warren. Obviously, some of these characters you were holding on to for a while, but like, what was the inspiration for these other characters? How did they come to life and take form? Because I'm actually very curious as to how you made something new to accompany something you've had for years upon years.
So I know for a fact that Piper was definitely one that we know a lot of very eccentric theater kids. And we were like, she would be the perfect kind of like, so I really wanted somebody very kind of lively and spiritual to be like a guitar player. Do you want the microphone?
A lot of these characters are kind of based off people that we've known in high school.
Yeah.
So like Piper is just that theater kid that everyone knows. Warren's very much based on Dave, or at least when I try and write him, I just think, what would Dave say?
He's based on my dad. Like the part where he grabs Quinn by the shoulders and says, now, ugly. My dad will call my friends by their last name all the time. That's where that comes from. And then Griff, I love characters that operate by their own sense of logic. And with him, it technically makes sense, but also you're like, why would you say it like that? He's very, like, I look at characters like Creed from The Office, and that's kind of like the vibe he has a little bit.
And also a huge part of it was just kind of looking at the characters we already had, and we're like, okay, what characters could we pair with the ones we have now to cause the most chaos?
Yes.
And so we definitely wanted Warren to kind of balance out Quinn's sort of like cocky, self-interested attitude. We wanted the dad to kind of, the straight man to kind of even things out.
We have the wannabe leader, Quinn, the straight man, Warren, the eccentric Piper, the wild card Griff, the anxious wreck Rue, and the dog. There you go.
Yeah.